The fifth session of the Senate in the second regular session of the 16th Congress is hereby called to order. The chamber will be led in prayer by Senator Sonny Trillanes IV, who is celebrating his birthday today. Senator Trillanes, please lead the chamber in prayer.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty God, we thank you for all the blessings that you have showered upon our country and people. We praise you, Lord, for we know that through your divine guidance we can accomplish anything. Cast your light upon our countrymen as we face life's greatest challenges and the adversities that plague our nation. May you bestow upon us the will to endure all trials that have come our way. May your will be done always. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
The Secretary will call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago Ejercito, Enrile Escudero Estrada Gingona, Honasan Lapid, Legarda Marcos, Smeña Pimentel, Po Recto Revilla, Soto Trillanes Villar. Senate President Trilon.
17 senators are present. The chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, today is the birthday, as you mentioned, of our colleague Senator Antonio Trillanes. May we suspend session to allow the members to greet him a happy birthday.
Session is suspended for 1 minute. The session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, before we move for the approval of the journal, may we acknowledge some guests in the gallery. We have with us faculty members of basic education from Chiang Kai-shek College, headed by Dr. Thieu, Ms. Gelna, and Ms. Benabese. We also have with us the Liga ng mga Barangay members of the Municipality of Dumangas, Province of Iloilo, led by Mr. Rolando Goles. And we have Mayor Miguel Peña of Pulupundan, Negros Occidental, a guest of Senator Ejercito.
Our guests from the Chiang Kai-shek College, faculty members of basic education, is welcome to the Senate. The Liga ng mga Barangay of my hometown, the Municipality of Batangas, of Dumangas, led by Rolando Goles, the President. You're welcome to the Senate. And Mayor Miguel Peña of Pulupundan, Negros Occidental.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 4th session, August 5, 2014, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Hearing none, the reading of the journal of the previous session is dispensed with, and the same is hereby approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Secretary will read the reference of business.
Message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 28 July 2014, it concurred with Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 5 entitled Concurrent Resolution Creating a Joint Committee of the Senate and the House of Representatives to notify the President of the Philippines that Congress, now convened for its second regular session of the 16th Congress of the Philippines, is ready to hear his State of the Nation address in a joint session of both houses.
To the archives.
Communications letter from the Public-Private Partnership Center submitting to the Senate a copy of the Build, Operate, Transfer Agreement of the Modernization of Philippine Orthopedic Center project and the concession agreement of the Automated Fare Collection System project in compliance with Section 14.4 of the Revised Implementing Rules and Regulations of Republic Act No. 7718, otherwise known as the amended Build, Operate, and Transfer Law.
Public Works.
Letter from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas submitting to the Senate the report on economic and financial developments in the Philippines for quarter 2014 pursuant to Section 39A, Chapter 1, Article 5 of the New Central Bank Act, RA number 7653.
Committee on
Banks.
Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
Letters from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas transmitting to the Senate copies of the following certified and authenticated BSP issuances in compliance with Section 15A of Republic Act No. 7653, the New Central Bank Act, Circular Numbers 833 to 849 dated 28 and 26 May, 5, 13, 18, 20, and 27 June, and 2 and 4 July 2014, Circular Letter Number CL 2013-034 to 49 dated 28 and 26 May, 25 June, and 3 and 11 July 2014, and Memorandum Numbers M 2013-024 to 27 dated 23 and 26 June 2014.
Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies.
Letters from the Office of the President of the Philippines transmitting to the Senate two regional copies of the following: Republic Act No. 10636, an act granting Philippine citizenship to Andre Blatch; Republic Act No. 10637, an act granting Cotabato Light and Power Company a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain a distribution system for the conveyance of electric power to the end users in the city of Cotabato and portions of the municipalities of Datu, Odin, Sinsuat, and Sultan Kudarat, both in the province of Maguindanao. Republic Act No. 10638, an act extending the corporate life of the Philippine National Railways for another 50 years, further amending for the purpose Republic Act No. 4156 as amended, entitled an act creating the Philippine National Railways, prescribing its powers, functions, and duties, and providing for the necessary funds for its operation. Republic Act No. 10639, an act mandating the telecommunications service providers to send free mobile alerts in the event of natural and man-made disasters and calamities. Republic Act No. 10640, an act to further strengthen the anti-drug campaign of the government, amending for the purpose Section 21 of RA No. 9165, otherwise known as the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002. Republic Act No. 10641, an act allowing the full entry of foreign banks in the Philippines, amending for the purpose Republic Act No. 7721. Republic Act No. 10642, an act strengthening consumer protection in the purchase of brand new motor vehicles. Republic Act No. 10643, an act to effectively instill health consciousness through graphic health warnings on tobacco products. Republic Act No. 10644, an act promoting job generation and inclusive growth through the development of micro, small, and medium enterprises. And Joint Resolution No. 2, Joint Resolution declaring July 27, 2014 as a special non-working holiday to commemorate the founding anniversary of the Iglesia ni Cristo, which were signed by His Excellency President Benigno Aquino III on June 11, 16, 20, and July 15, 2014, respectively.
To the archives.
Letter from the Malacanang Records Office dated 4 July 2014 submitting to the Senate certified copy of Proclamation No. 815 dated July 2, 2014 titled Declaring Year 2014 as Iglesia ni Cristo Centennial Year.
To the archives.
Additional reference of business. Bills on first reading. Senate number 2337, an act banning the use of single-use throwaway bags regardless of composition in all retail establishments and providing penalties for violations thereof by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Environment, Natural Resources, Ways and Means.
Senate number 2338, an act mandating the labeling of food produced with genetic engineering, introduced by Senator Defensor Santiago.
Trade, Commerce, Entrepreneurship, Health, and Demography.
Senate number 2339, an act institutionalizing an age-appropriate curriculum to prevent the abduction, exploitation, and sexual abuse of children and appropriating funds therefore by Senator Defensor Santiago. Education.
Trade, I'm sorry, Education, Arts and Culture, Youth and Finance.
Senate number 2340, an act penalizing racketeers and criminal enterprises, prohibiting such criminal enterprises and racketeer, influenced and corrupt organizations from infiltrating, controlling, or otherwise influencing Philippine commerce. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Justice and Human Rights.
Senate number 2341, an act amending certain provisions of Republic Act 7394, otherwise known as the Consumer Act of the Philippines, defining for the purpose the crime of pseudo-investments, providing penalties therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Cynthia A. Villar.
Trade, Commerce, Entrepreneurship.
Senate number 2342, an act mandating the full accounting of all disaster relief and aid or donations received by Philippine government for natural and human-induced calamities, by Senator Escudero.
Finance.
Senate number 2343, an act to assist persons with hemophilia and other bleeding disorders, establishing for the purpose 4 treatment centers in Metro Manila, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, providing funds thereof and for other purposes, by Senator Grace Poe.
Health and Demography, Finance.
Resolutions. PS Resolution number 804, congratulating and commending Filipino math wizards Adrian Reginald C., Harvey Uy, Jen Martano, Andrew Lawrence C., and Raymond Fadre for bringing pride to the country by emerging victorious in the 11th China Southeast Mathematical Olympiad CSMO held in Fuyang City in Zhejiang, People's Republic of China, from July 25 to 30, 2014, introduced by Senator Lapid.
Rules.
PS Resolution number 805, congratulating and commending Sagip, Saklolo at Gabay ng Ina at Pamilya for being one of 6 winners of the Service Recognition Award of Sonta International during its 62nd International Convention in Orlando, Florida, from June 27 to July 1, 2014, by Senator Lapid.
Rules.
PS Resolution number 806, congratulating and commending Filipino junior golfer Princess Mary Superal for winning the prestigious U.S. Girls Junior Championship of the Forest Highlands Golf Club in Flagstaff, Arizona on 26 July 2014, by Senator Lapid.
Rules.
PS Resolution number 807, congratulating and commending Dumingag, Zamboanga del Sur, Mayor Nacianceno June Mejos Pacalioga Jr. for winning the One World Award 2012 on 14 September 2012 in Legau, Germany, by Senator Cynthia A. Villar and Lapid.
Rules.
PS Resolution number 808, urging the Senate Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Economic Affairs, and Ways and Means to conduct an inquiry into the persistent congestion in the Manila ports as it severely disrupts the service and flow of goods in and out of the country, with the purpose of taking the appropriate legislative action to address the same, if only to prevent this continuing economic crisis. Senator Escudero.
Trade, Commerce, Entrepreneurship, Economic Affairs, Ways and Means.
Yes, Resolution number 809, directing the Committee on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the alarming disturbance on the operations of local business importers and exporters due to the congestion in the ports of Manila, by Senator Paulo Benigno Bamay Aquino IV.
Commerce, Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Economic Affairs, Ways and Means.
Communication letter from the Department of Public Works and Highways Office of the District Engineer Diet Camarines Norte, submitting to the Senate its report with annexes A to D for the quarter ending June 30, 2014.
Finance.
Committee reports. Committee report number 61, submitted by the Committee on Finance on PS Resolution number 554, introduced by Senator Defensor Santiago, entitled Resolution Directing the Proper Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the alleged clerical errors in the preparation and issuance of special allotment and release order SAROS at the Department of Budget and Management, recommending that it be archived.
To the archives.
Committee report number 62, submitted by the Committee on Finance on Senate number 466, introduced by Senator Recto, entitled An Act Providing Additional Funds for the Revised AFP Modernization Program, earmarking the national government share in the Malampaya Natural Gas to Power Project for such purpose, thereby amending Republic Act number 7898 as amended by Republic Act number 10349, recommending its approval with amendments. Sponsor Senators Escudero and Recto.
Calendar for ordinary business. The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may we acknowledge some guests in the gallery. A guest of Senator Legarda. We have Director Mundita Lim of the Biodiversity Management Bureau of the DENR.
Our guest from the DNR is recognized and the presence is made of record from the from the Biodiversity Management Bureau of the DNR.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that Senator Lauren Legarda be recognized to speak on a matter of public interest.
Senator Legarda is recognized on a question of public interest.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, we are faced with the great challenge of healing our environment. The disasters that have befallen our nation and the existing risks of potentially destructive natural hazards should be more than enough to change a public mindset intent on extractive and consumptive economics that threatens to destroy what took thousands of years to form. Humans have altered and degraded ecosystems more rapidly and extensively in the past decades to meet growing demands on basic needs. Although some of these activities have contributed to the well-being of humans as well as to economic development, the ecological consequences are equally significant and alarming. In the 24 ecosystem services examined through the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment between 2001 and 2015, or approximately 60%, were degraded or used unsustainably. And these changes, some of them irrevocable, would mean that future generations may no longer gain the same benefits from these ecosystems. Studies reveal that climate change is unequivocal, with scientists recently concluding that there is a 95 or 100% likelihood that human activity is a cause of global warming, mainly due to greenhouse gas like carbon dioxide emitted through burning of fossil fuel, deforestation, and land use change. The effects of these activities are greatly felt today as natural hazards of increasing frequency and volume cause a disruption of lives and livelihood and enormous social and economic losses. The irony is that the things we want to gain and develop through the use of ecosystem services are the very same things we lose due to exploitation and unsustainable use of our natural resources. The main message I wish to impart is this: we all live in one earth, and climate change is now teaching us the hard way that we do not own our planet, but are mere dwellers and stewards of its resources. And as such, we must be responsible for and respectful of Mother Nature. The Biodiversity Management Bureau of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources earlier held a consultation workshop to enhance the draft Philippine Resolution on Wetlands and Disaster Risk Reduction. We are hoping that this will be considered for approval during the 48th meeting of a standing committee as part of the proposals at the 12th meeting of the Conference of the Contracting Parties to the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, or COP12, in June 2015 in Punta del Este, Uruguay. With experts from different stakeholders present in the consultation, we are certain that this is a goal well within our reach, owing to our extensive experience as a nation among those most vulnerable to extreme weather events and climate change. The greater challenge, however, especially to the experts who know very well the importance of our wetlands to life, livelihood, and disaster risk reduction, is how to communicate this message to our people. It would not be enough that we have this resolution approved and adopted by COP12, because as we bring it up to the policy makers and decision makers, we will have to bring it down again to our people who can actually protect our wetlands. We are fortunate that the Philippines serves as host to 6 wetlands of international importance as qualified by the Ramsar Convention, namely the Agusan Marsh Wildlife Sanctuary in Mindanao, the Nauhan Lake National Park in Oriental Mindoro, the Olango Island Wildlife Sanctuary in Cebu, the Puerto Princesa Subterranean River National Park in Palawan, Tubataha Reefs Natural Park in Sulu, and the Las Piñas Parañaque Critical Habitat and Ecotourism Area of Senator Cynthia Villar. Wetlands, which are either natural or man-made, are permanently or seasonally saturated by water, which make them suitable for vegetation that can adapt to saturated soil conditions. Their basic function is to conserve and to provide water. Wetlands also play a significant role in climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. Apart from supporting biodiversity in their host areas, wetlands also regulate water flow and precipitation and acts as a flood control system and provides protection against strong waves. Let me operationalize or simplify the highly scientific or technical words I've been using, Mr. President. In the municipality of General MacArthur in eastern Samar, residents have their mangroves to thank, as these shielded them from the wrath of Super Typhoon Yolanda. The town was spared from massive destruction since the mangrove served as buffer against the storm surge. Nearby coastal towns without mangroves suffered a different fate. I recall some Valentine's years ago, perhaps 10 years ago, then Mayor Hagedorn of Puerto Princesa, along with hundreds of newlyweds, and I planted mangroves in Puerto Princesa. I am certain that a good Senate President who has a brilliant heritage to leave behind in the city of Iloilo and his province will do the same, and in fact, I believe has been doing that in planting not only beautiful fruit-bearing and flower-bearing trees, but perhaps also mangroves. This is one story, Mr. President, that highlights the importance of wetlands, such as mangrove forests. We must not wait for every community to experience a disaster or escape from one to make them realize the vital role of ecosystems in DRR. Seagrass beds prevent coastal erosion. Coral reefs provide protection against storm surges and inundation. Wetlands' ability to retain water longer than other areas make them vital in times of drought. I recall, Mr. President, I've been standing on this podium for 3 terms now. I've been mentioning the term storm surges. And so, when Yolanda happened in November 8 of 2013, it was not acceptable when people said they did not realize or know what storm surge meant. Wetlands, Mr. President, are likewise essential to food and water and can provide alternative livelihood through ecotourism. Without wetlands, other ecosystems like marine and forests will all suffer. Species of birds, migratory and non-migratory, will also suffer, as well as other flora and fauna. The biodiversity associated within the country's 216 lakes, the 421 principal rivers, the 22 marshes, swamps, and reservoirs is critical to food security and the livelihood through fisheries and other resources. All these realities and other benefits we can gain through the sustainable use of our wetlands and other critical ecosystems, and thereby protect our citizens from the impact of natural hazards and climate change. Each of us has opportunities to make a difference for our future. We must take hold of every opportunity to responsibly manage our wetlands. We must maintain focus and our momentum in order to restore health to our wetlands and other critical habitats and ecosystems, and thereby protect our citizens from the impact of natural hazards and climate change. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Legarda. The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, there's no member who wishes to ask.
Mr. President,
I think Senator Cynthia Villar wishes to interpolate.
Mr. President,
Senator Villar is recognized.
Mr. President, I just want to make a manifestation. I wish to thank Senator Lauren Legarda for supporting the preservation of wetlands in the Philippines, and I hope more senators will do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Villar. I also wish to commend you for the mangrove reforestation that you've been conducting, which I read about in the papers. And I hope that our wetlands, because we have 6, can be declared as protected areas as well, because not all are contained in the 1992 NEPAS Act, which declared 113 sites as protected areas, some of which I am hearing, so that there could be individual Republic Acts or RAs to convert them all into natural parks. So thank you for that kind manifestation.
Mr. President, with no other member wishing to interpolate, I move that we refer the speech of Senator Legarda to the Committee on Climate Change.
So referred.
Mr. President, I move that we transfer Senate Bill number 161 under Committee Report number 60. This is the Security of Tenure for All Casual and Contractual Government Employees Bill, from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders.
Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
I move that we consider Senate Bill number 161 under Committee Report number 60.
Consideration of the best wish in order.
With the permission of the body, I move that the Secretary read only the title of the measure.
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill number 161 under Committee Report number 60, entitled An Act Providing for Security of Tenure for All Casual and Contractual Employees of the Government who have rendered the prescribed years of service in the national government agencies and the local government units, and for other purposes.
I move that we recognize Senator Trillanes to sponsor the measure.
Senator Trillanes is recognized to sponsor the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Civil Service and Government Reorganization has the privilege to sponsor Senate Bill number 161 under Committee Report number 60. In 1990, during the 9th Congress, Republic Act number 6850 was enacted to grant civil service eligibility under certain conditions to government employees appointed under provisional or temporary status who have rendered a total of 7 years of efficient service pursuant to the implementing rules and regulations drafted by the Civil Service Commission. However, there is a clamor for the passage of a new law because RA 6850 failed to cover casual and contractual employees who have rendered or similarly rendered efficient service to the government also for substantial periods of time. Furthermore, in 1995, RA 7883 was enacted into law granting benefits and incentives to accredited barangay health workers. One of the salient features of this measure is the granting of the second grade civil service eligibility to accredited barangay health workers who have rendered 5 years of continuous service, such as part of the incentives and benefits to them. Hence, in an apparent desire to extend the benefit of the law to casual and contractual employees, a number of bills in recent Congresses have been proposed. Mr. President, your committee, however, took note of the points raised by the CSC that granting civil service eligibility to the affected employees may not necessarily grant them security of tenure because, 1, most of them hold non-permanent positions, and the grant to them of civil service eligibility will have no effect at all if said positions are scrapped or abolished. 2, the grant of eligibility to the affected employees does not necessarily guarantee that they will be appointed to permanent positions even if the said positions are available, since the same is actually subject to the discretion of the appointing authority. Hence, with the help of the stakeholders, your committee sought to refine the measure in order to achieve the desired objective of providing security of tenure to the affected employees. After deliberate consideration, your committee has ultimately adopted the concept of which would address concerns raised by the CSC and which would ensure that the affected employees will enjoy security of tenure as the proposed legislative measure intended. The concept adopted is to give the positions of the qualified employees a coterminous with the incumbent status, or CTI. Under this concept, the concerned employee enjoys executive tenure and may not be removed from his or her position even if he does not occupy a permanent or plantilla position except for cause and with due process of law until his resignation, promotion, or retirement, at which time his or her position would be considered abolished. The grant of CTI status is not a new concept. DBM has in the past approved the grant of CTI status to certain employees within the bureaucracy, particularly to certain rank and file employees of the National Food Authority with salary grades 23 and below affected by EO 366, as well as to certain employees of the Department of Agriculture whose positions were considered redundant under EO 366. Hence, Mr. President, Senate Bill number 161 has adopted and approved, provided for the following salient provisions. Under Section 2 of the bill, all incumbent, casual, and contractual government employees who have rendered at least 5 years of continuous service in the case of national government agencies, or a total of 10 years of continuous service in the case of local government employees as of the date of the approval of this act, shall be entitled to security of tenure. Under Section 3 of the bill, all of the positions affected by this act currently held by the covered employees shall be deemed necessary and or desirable for the efficient operation of the government and shall be marked as coterminous with the incumbent. The same Section 3, also provides that all covered employees may not be separated or terminated from said positions except for just or lawful cause and with due process of law, nor can their positions be abolished except when the same are vacated by their incumbents. Today, Mr. President, I humbly submit this proposed legislative measure for the consideration of our colleagues with the aim of recognizing the services and sacrifices of our casual and contractual government employees who have rendered long years of faithful, dedicated, and efficient service to the country and our people. The fact that the government has created casual and contractual positions and keeps appointing people to said positions year after year proves that the said positions are clearly necessary or desirable to the orderly and efficient operation of the concerned agencies. And the fact that these agencies keep appointing the same individuals to these casual or contractual positions year after year necessarily implies that, at the very least, the said employees meet the minimum qualification standards for the said positions and are able to effectively perform the functions of the said positions. The passage of this bill, Mr. President, would merely institutionalize the right to security of tenure of casual and contractual employees of the government who have rendered for substantial periods of time, a right which is not only part of our labor statutes and jurisprudence, but which is inscribed in the fundamental law itself, the 1987 Constitution. Mr. President, this is not the first time that we're tackling this bill. During the 15th Congress, a similar version of this bill was passed on third reading in this chamber. However, unfortunately, it was not acted upon by counterparts in the House of Representatives. It is the hope of this committee that this measure will be finally passed into law for the benefit of our casual and contractual employees. Mr. President, it is in this light that your chairman earnestly urged our colleagues in this chamber to support the immediate passage of this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill 161 under Committee Report number 60.
Consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of proposed Senate Joint Resolution number 2 under Committee Report 4. This is the subsistence allowance of all officers and enlisted personnel of the AFP.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
The status of the measure, Mr. President, is that we are in the period of individual amendments. I thus move that we recognize the sponsor, again, Senator Trillanes. I move that we recognize the sponsor,
Senator Trillanes.
Senator Trillanes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President.
To propose amendments, I move that we recognize the chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance, Senator Chis Escudero.
Yes, before I recognize Senator Escudero, just for the record, so that there can be an orderly recording, we will be using the amended copy as of August 5, 2014, so that the reference to the lines and the pages can be accurate. With that, Senator Escudero is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished Majority Floor Leader. With the permission of the distinguished author and sponsor, may I propose, Mr. President, the following individual amendment. On page 2, lines 22 to 28, delete the paragraph and in lieu thereof insert the following. Resolved finally, comma, that the amount necessary to implement the provisions of this act shall be included in the annual General Appropriations Act. I so move, Mr. President.
What does the sponsor say?
I accept the amendment, Mr. President.
Okay. That, I'm sorry, which page is that? I did.
Page 2, lines 22 to 28, Mr. President. Delete and in lieu thereof insert the amendment I propose.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none, the sponsor has accepted the Escudero amendment. No objection from the part from anyone. Approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. No further amendments on the part of this representation.
Mr. President, Senate President Pro Tempore Senator Recto has also indicated his desire to make some clarifications and possibly propose some amendments. I move for his recognition.
Senator Recto is recognized.
Can we have a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Suspended for 1 minute.
Thank you.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the Senate President Pro Tempore, Senator Recto.
Senator Recto is recognized in the period of amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. And again, I'd like to thank the sponsor for proposing in this resolution the increase in subsistence allowance, Mr. President, which I fully support, just to put that on record as well. Just a few clarifications before I propose some of my amendments, Mr. President. Procedurally, why is it a resolution and not a bill, Mr. President?
Okay. The basis for that, Mr. President, was the previous increase in subsistence allowance was Joint Resolution number 4, which was passed back in 2005. So we used that as a working template so that it would be more efficient, Mr. President.
Yes. In effect, we have done this in the past, and it would have an effect of law.
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Next question, Mr. President. We will be deliberating the GAA in the weeks to come. Is it possible that Congress increase through the GAA the subsistence allowance even if we pass this bill up to 150? Pwede bang gawin ng Kongreso na gawin 200 in the GAA? O di kaya even lower than 150? Will it prohibit Congress from increasing it further or even decreasing it, Mr. President?
No, Mr. President. The Congress can exercise its power of the purse through the budget deliberations. So we can go through that process, or we can legislate it like this, Mr. President.
Yes. Thank you for that. I just wanted to put all of that in the record as well, Mr. President.
Yes,
Mr. President. Yes.
Excuse me. The chair is of the view that if it is a substantive law, you may not amend it through the budget because the budget expires every year. So the General Appropriations Act must conform to the substantive law that Congress will enact, which means that if we set it at 150, the budget may not provide for a lower amount because this is a substantive law.
Yes. Or a higher amount. Is that
or
the
a higher
case?
amount. Because the budget, the national budget will expire every December 31.
Correct.
So what happens after that?
Yes. So precisely the point, Mr. President. So you cannot have a situation wherein you pass something similar to this.
Sorry?
You pass something similar to this as a resolution, and later on in the debates for the budget, that for a particular period of year you can increase it and then go back to the 150 as mentioned in the resolution.
That is why
I just wanted to put that on record, Mr. President.
The view of the chair, if the budget expires every year, if you provide a different amount, what happens after the budget expires? I mean, after the General Appropriations Act expires.
Yes, it would depend again on the new general appropriations. If it's 150, then that would be 150. In effect, the point is, when you pass something like this, does it become a continuing appropriation in that sense?
I don't know.
These are just some of the questions I just wanted to clarify for the record, Mr. President. Again, let me reiterate that I support this measure, Mr. President.
Mr. President, it's very explicit in the resolutory clause of this bill, of this joint resolution, that thereafter the national government shall include in the General Appropriations Act the amount corresponding to the total annual cost of the subsistence allowance. So it has that provision that would become an automatic appropriations in the years to come, Mr. President.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. We just wanted to put that on the record. Next question, Mr. President. What are the other benefits and allowances and bonuses given to, let's say, the AFP, the PNP, the BFP, the Coast Guard, the so on and so forth?
I
Subsistence allowance would be one of them.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah.
President.
Would we have a list of the other allowances?
They have different to the knowledge of this sponsor, Mr. President. Although it may not be current at this point, but back when I was still in the Navy, we got what we call the sea duty pay, and the laundry allowance corresponding to around 100 pesos per month. Not per day. It's 150 pesos per month, and a few more insignificant allowances, Mr. President. Aside from the common allowances, the bonuses like the mid-year bonus, year-end bonus, and so forth.
Yes, Mr. President. The reason why I'm asking, and would that be the same with the PNP or different naman yung allowances, bonuses ng PNP, ng BFP, ng Coast Guard, so on and so forth?
I believe it would be different.
It would be different.
The common allowances for these different armed services would be the subsistence allowance, Mr. President.
Yes, okay. So common would be the subsistence allowance, but there would be other allowances. Mr. President, are you aware of a BIR memorandum circular that anything above 30,000 will be taxable, in effect?
Yes, Mr. President. We are aware that there was such a BIR circular, and we are in fact in the process of finding a way to get even the Senate employees exempted from that. But for now, that circular stays until, example, a temporary restraining order would be issued by the Supreme Court, Mr. President.
Yes, I understand that. And precisely why I'm asking the different allowances and hopefully sana the values as well, because I am sure the intention of the sponsor is the increase in subsistence allowance should be tax-free.
Yes.
Is that correct,
yes,
Mr.
Mr.
President?
President?
And that is a proposed amendment which I will do later on,
Yes.
or at the appropriate time, that this subsistence allowance na tinataasan natin be tax-free, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. I am pretty sure that the recipients of this new subsistence allowance would very much welcome that proposed amendment that this subsistence allowance be tax-free, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you. And that was the reason why I was asking for the different allowances and bonuses,
Yes.
Mr. President. Mr. President, what is the definition of the subsistence allowance? Why is it given to begin with?
The nature of the work of our soldiers, strictly or technically, it is defined as an allowance for meal and sustenance given to government personnel who, by the nature of their duties and responsibilities of their position, have to make their services available at all times in their places of work, even during meal times. So we cannot overemphasize the nature of the work of the armed services. So this definition covers the uniformed personnel, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. I have here a DBM manual on position classification, chapter 3, compensation plan. It has the subsistence allowance and it identifies who are covered, no? And it includes here public health workers, marine officers, engineers, crew, government vessels, officials and employees, so light keepers, laborers, temporarily fielded to isolated and unsettled areas. would you have any objection if we were to include all those who receive subsistence allowance? Meaning to say, why leave out public health workers and other social workers, for example? I'm sure the gentleman is not objecting to that, Mr. President.
Most definitely not, Mr. President. However, just to explain, the spirit of the bill covers only the uniform services because it's within the competence of the committee of the sponsor, and this sponsor would very much would volunteer that a similar bill would be filed to cover all those who deserve or who are an increase of the subsistence allowance of all those in government who are currently receiving subsistence allowance, Mr. President. It's just that our committee wasn't able to study
Yes.
These other government employees, Mr.
Yes.
President.
I understand the position of the sponsor, the chairman of the committee. But having said that, Mr. President, it is an opportunity also of plenary to include all those receiving subsistence allowance. Since tinataas natin for this sector, bakit hindi natin gawin na rin for those not enumerated in this particular bill, Mr. President? And there's an opportunity for us to do so since we're talking about subsistence allowance and increasing benefits to government employees, Mr. President. At the appropriate time, I will try to introduce the amendment, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, we will consider such
Yes.
amendment at the proper time.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. Just a few more questions, Mr. President. What caught my attention here as well, Mr. President, is the whereas clauses. Because it would appear to me that the same issues confronted by many of our uniformed personnel are also being confronted by other government employees, Mr. President. No? One is, as I mentioned already, the subsistence allowance. No? In line 15 to 18 of page 1, 1A, yes, page 1 pa rin siya. It says here, whereas the current subsistence allowance of 90 pesos per day is no longer adequate to meet the basic needs of Filipino military soldiers and uniformed personnel of the DILG and DOTC PCG in view of the increasing prices of basic commodities. That would appear to me the same for all other government employees, Mr. President.
I would agree, Mr. President.
Especially in the light with the latest NSO data that inflation hit 4.9%, Mr. President. And the reality on the ground is that in many instances that number may be too low. In fact, by region, there are regions that inflation has hit 8%, Mr. President. That is the principal reason why we are increasing the subsistence allowance based on the resolution, Mr. President, which I support, Mr. President. Okay. Mr. President, may I also find out from the distinguished sponsor if he would have a definition of the pera?
Mr. President, as far as this representation recalls, the PERA stands for Personnel Emergency Relief Allowance or something to that effect.
Personal Economic Relief Allowance.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. President. So that's as far as I know, Mr. President.
Yeah. Would the distinguished gentleman be willing to accept a possible amendment? Just a possible, because I'm still studying this matter as well, Mr. President, of increasing the pera of all government employees based on the savings as well of their departments.
This sponsor
And
was,
in effect,
yes,
the AFP and the PNP would have double din. Kasi tataas na yung pera nila, tataas pa yung subsistence allowance din. In fact, there is a bill in the Civil Service Commission committee which I filed increasing the pera of all government employees because the pera is also tax-free, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. The sponsor was just informed of the bill filed by Senator Recto regarding the increase of the pera, and the sponsor assures the gentleman from Batangas that it will be heard within the month, and it would be reported out to this body soon thereafter, so that we can tackle that very important matter at that time, Mr. President.
Okay. Mr. President, with the permission of the sponsor, if he would allow me to, on Monday, to propose my amendments already, and I promise to be finished by Monday, Mr. President, if that would be fine with the sponsor.
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes. Mr. President, again, I thank the sponsor for being very candid in answering the questions, and I promise to propose the amendments on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. No further questions, Mr. President.
Just a word to Senator Recto. When you propose the amendments, which will cover the civilian employees.
Not necessarily, Mr. President, because I heard from the gentleman that he may report out that bill anyway.
No, but including, for example, all those in the civilian sector
receiving subsistence allowance. Yes.
What I was just going to point out is that your amendment should take a good look at the whereas clauses, because all the whereas clauses are designed only for the armed forces.
Yes, I assure the Mr.
You just
President,
have to amend everything.
Yes. Yeah, similar to how the amendments were made by Senator Gingona as well, Mr. President. When I think they included the Coast Guard, if I'm not
anyway,
mistaken.
that's a matter that I was just calling your attention to, and certainly.
Yes, Mr. President, we're conscious of that, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of proposed Senate Joint Resolution number 2 under Committee Report number 4.
Any objection here?
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock of the afternoon of Monday, August 11, 2014.
Session is adjourned until 3 o'clock of Monday, August 11, 2014.